back with Woman of the Bible, Hager. Her character, a foreigner and a slave. She let pride overtake her when she became Adam's wife. A lonely woman with few resources. She suffered harsh punishment for her mistakes. She obeyed God's voice as soon as she heard it and was given a promise that her son would become the father of great nations. Her sorrow, that she was taken from her homeland to become a slave in a foreign land where she was mistreated for many years. Her joy, to know that God cared, that he saw her suffering and heard her cry, and that he helped her when she needed him most. Her story, the Egypt slave and Sarah bitter rival. Hagar still had one thing going for her that her mistress never enjoyed, a personal revelation of God, who lovingly intervened on her behalf, not once but twice. It happened when she was alone and afraid, without a shikku to her name. But that giving ahead of the story. But that's getting ahead of the story. You may remember that Abraham, who we honor as the father of faith, showed little evidence of that faith when he and Sarah first entered Egypt to escape a famine in Canaan. Certain the Egyptians would kill him once they caught sight of his beautiful wife. He advised her to pose as his sister. Soon enough, Pharaoh added Sarah to his harem and rewarded Abraham with an abundance of camels, sheep, cattle, donkeys, and servants. But God punished Pharaoh for his unwitting error so effectively that when he found out that Sarah was actually Abraham's wife, he begged the two of them to leave Egypt with all of their belongings. Quite likely, Hagar was part of the booty. the booty. Abraham and Sarah took with them a gift of that later backfired. Still, of the three parties involved in a scheme to make Hagar a surrogate mother, she was perhaps the only innocent one, a slave with little power to resist. For Hagar to bear Abraham's heir, she had to become not just a concubine, but a wife. But when Sarah raised Hagar to that position, she opened the door to spiritual catastrophes. As soon as Hagar discovered her pregnancy, she began lording it over her mistress. Not a smart move for a young foreigner up against a woman entrenched in her husband's affection. In fact, Sarah made life so difficult for Hagar that she fled into the desert, a desperate move for a young woman bearing a child so far from home. She hadn't gotten far before she heard a voice calling, "Hagar, servants of Sarah, where have you come from, and where are you going? Go back to your mistress and submit to her." But then, as if to sweeten the order, came word of assurance. "You are now with child, and you will have a son. You should name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery." Remarkably, Hagar didn't argue, but turned right around and retraced her steps. God's words penetrate the wilderness of her heart like a fresh spring nourishing a desert. Her bondage, her bitterness, her anxiety about the future. God had seen every bit of it. He knew about the child in her womb, naming him Ishmael, meaning God hears. In the future, every time Hagar would hold her son close, watch him play, or worry about his future, she would remember that God was near, listening for the child's cry. Little wonder that she had responded to the voice of the desert by calling the Lord, the God who sees me. Some 16 years later, Hagar found herself once again in the wilderness, this time by force rather than by choice. In the bitterness, Sarah had expelled her and Ishmael from their home. Dying from thirst, Hagar placed her son under a bush and withdrew, unable to witness his agony. Her weeping was soon broken by an angel's voice. "Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. With that, the angel of the Lord opened Hagar's eyes so that she discovered a well of water nearby that would save her son's life. The well became known as Bir Lahol Road, or the well of the living ones who sees me. The last we see of Hagar, she is living in the desert of Paran in the Sinai Peninsula, y'all, busy securing a wife and therefore a future for Ishmael. God had made a way in his wilderness for a single woman and her son without friends, family, or resources to help her. He had seen, he had heard, and he had indeed been faithful. Her life and times. Slavery was common practice in ancient Eastern culture, so common that God laws made provision for its safe and fair practice, but not for its destruction. Slaves were obtained in any other number of ways. Captives from war became slaves, particularly virgin women. Men and women and their children went into slavery to pay debts. Slaves could be purchased, and sometimes slavery was even voluntary, as when a male slave who could had gone free remained in servitude in order to stay with his wife as he loved. Hager and Egypt probably became slaves to Abraham and Sarah when they left Egypt, leaving her homeland behind. She made herself useful and proved herself trustworthy, therefore becoming Sarah's maidservant, a position of some importance in the household. Sarah must have had some confidence and perhaps even affection for Hagar to want her to be the surrogate mother to her son. Such practices were common in that day, and further women urged their husbands to take their men servants in order to gain a child and heir for the family. Female slaves were often made the concubines or wives of the masters or one of his sons. Their children became the property and sometimes the heir of their masters. As female slaves, they had no choice in the matter. They were alone with no rights and no one to defend them. Many women today are in a position similar to Hagar. They may not be actual slaves, but they are in positions of weakness with no one to defend them, no one except God. The same God who defended Hagar and heard the cries of her son in the desert hears the cries of helpless women and their children today. When we are at our weakest, God is his best, ready to step in and say to us, as he said to Hagar, don't be afraid. So y'all, that's pretty much Hagar's story. And I will be back with another woman of the Bible. Thank y'all. Please like, comment, and subscribe.